Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Peter McCullough. Will you get on your feet and welcome him?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, and thanks to each and every one of you for attending. Lance is an absolute driving force in health and wellness and in truth. And I've been so privileged to be on his show several times. And each time, we have millions and millions of views. As introduced, I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm in practice as an internist, a cardiologist. I'm a research epidemiologist. I'm the chief scientific officer of the Wellness Company, probably the brightest corporate development that's come out of the pandemic. I'm president of the McCullough Foundation. And I'm one of the most published doctors on the pandemic in the world. And so in my most recent book, Joe Rogan had to put a comment on there. He said, Dr. McCullough was right about everything. Well, I've been careful, as you have, and I've been cautious, but I haven't wavered from the truth. And we've entered a time of medical madness. And if there isn't a better example of that, it was this week in the U.S. Senate when Senator Josh Hawley was interrogating a Dr. Verma. Who saw that? And he asked her at least half a dozen times, can a man get pregnant? And she would not answer the question. No qualified doctor would ever hesitate on that question. We've entered a time of great madness. How many of you have lost trust in your doctors, the clinics and hospitals around you? How many have lost trust? Easily 80 to 90% have lost trust. What I want to do in the next few minutes and give you a historical perspective of how this can happen is happened before in U.S. history and how we can find our way forward. So let me bring up the slides here. There we go. The first example is what I call the first great cocaine epidemic. A lot of you don't think about this, but 1860 to 1920, what was going on in modern medicine at that time? Every medicinal product made by any drug company was a derivative of cocaine. Cocaine became a widely used component of anesthetic. William Halsted, the father of modern surgery at Johns Hopkins, became a brutal cocaine addict, and so did Sigmund Freud in psychiatry. And the medical literature was filled with articles and reviews and testimonials from doctors about the merits of cocaine. Giving energy, vitality, that this was an elixir. Chances are, if you were alive in 1870 and you saw your doctor for some problem, you would receive cocaine. It was a part of products for toothaches, and it was a part of Chianti wine and Coca-Cola. The entire country became hooked on cocaine. You can imagine it's one of the most addictive substances on earth. Look at this, Coca-Cola, cooling, refreshing, thirst quenching. If you don't want to worry about your day, have some Coca-Cola. Well, what happened? It became a very, very dark time. It became a very dark time in medicine. In the Journal of the American Medical Association, the most widely read journal in medicine at that time, in that entire 60-year span, there was one paper published of concern regarding addiction to cocaine. One. There were hundreds and hundreds of papers extolling the virtues of cocaine. The point is, 60 years and no corrective action by the medical orthodoxy. 60 years. Let me go back for a second. It took Woodrow Wilson, 1913, And then in the UK Dangerous Narcotics Act, it took legislative action to take cocaine away from the doctors and the nurses and the assistants. They were all equally addicted. But the point is, 60 years, there was no insight that the medical community could be off track. How about smoking? 1920 to 1972. By the time we got to post-World War II, virtually every doctor and nurse in America smoked. R.G.R. Reynolds, Phillips Tobacco, American Tobacco Company, they all had physician office cigarette campaigns. Doctors handed out cigarettes. They studied which were the best tasting, which had the least throat irritation. Doctors smoked Camels. The entire medical community became completely ensconced in smoking. Completely. That's not that long ago. That is not that long ago. And in The Emperor of All Maladies, a Pulitzer Prize-winning book written by Mukherjee, who was at Harvard Dana-Farber Institute a few years ago, he describes the lead lung cancer surgeon at Johns Hopkins taking out these blackened cancers in smokers while he himself was smoking. And he was teaching the fellows and the students, no, smoking doesn't cause lung cancer. The black smoke going in doesn't have anything to do with the black tumors I'm taking out. And he himself dies of lung cancer. And he can't see it. It's medical madness. Just like that doctor this week in the Senate who can't understand or has somehow lost her way in understanding a man can't get pregnant. It's the same medical madness that has, in a sense, taken over medicine. And self-participation is a big part of this. When doctors were using cocaine, they couldn't see the dangers. When doctors were smoking cigarettes, they couldn't see the dangers. Look at this. No unpleasant aftertaste, always by Chesterfield. This was medical marketing 101. More doctors smoke Camels. There you go. Well, who are the heroes here? Austin Bradford Hill, an epidemiologist in the UK, and Sir Richard Doral. 1950, they study this, and they present the results to the Medical Research Council. And it says, listen, it looks like smoking causes cancer. It's not a stretch, right? Black smoke shouldn't be in the lungs. The cancer is in the lungs. It's not too hard. It's not that hard of a connection to make. Medical Research Council in the UK, no. It can't be smoking that's driving lung cancer. They're dismissed. They're smeared. The tobacco company goes after Doral particularly. He's a doctor. Austin Bradford Hill gets tuberculosis and becomes sick. They go on for the next 3 years and they do complete the physician smoking study, and they conclude 50% of the deaths among physicians in the UK are directly due to smoking. They present the results again to the Medical Research Council, and again they are rejected. They're smeared. If they had Twitter accounts, they'd be taken down off Twitter. Luther Terry, U.S. Surgeon General, 1964. By the way, this is the type of Surgeon General we need. Not somebody who's flunked out of their residency, who hasn't gotten going. We need a real Surgeon General. He was a real Surgeon General, okay? He compiles, 1964, the U.S. Surgeon General report on smoking. He calls all the doctors to Washington, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Harvard. They're all smoking in the audience. He presents the information. Hey, doctors, got bad news for you. Smoking has genuine harms. They reject it. This is 1964. Many of you were alive in 1964. This goes all the way until 1978, before the AMA finally concedes there are some health hazards to smoking. I'm a teenager at this time. Really? Really, it has to go that long before we recognize something obvious like smoking has health hazards, the most obvious one being lung cancer and then emphysema? The point is, the medical community doesn't correct itself. There was no internal memos going on saying, listen, watch out, this doesn't look too good. No warnings, no grand rounds, no discussion. And finally, you get to the 1990s, we have the Great Tobacco Settlement. So we went from nearly every doctor and nurse smoking in 1950 now to nearly zero smoking. But what did it take? People didn't correct course in the middle of their career. Largely, generations of doctors and nurses had to die out, and then new ones had to come forward. Now, finally, the one we're in right now, vaccine mania. Vaccine mania. I've never said the word vaccine so much in my clinical career. I'm coming up on 40 years in medicine. They were kind of always in the background. I didn't think too much about vaccines. I personally took all the vaccines that I was supposed to on a schedule. My kids took all the vaccines. I'm not against taking vaccines, but I never thought much about them. Now it's morning, noon, and night. This is everywhere. It's on TV. It's in every single communication that we see. There's been a tremendous timeline of vaccine development from just 5 preventable diseases when I was a child and a few shots to, we were up to 17 vaccine preventable diseases. Now it's been trimmed to 11, but we were up to 93 shots. That's been dropped by 55. But the question on the table is, can a perfectly healthy human being be made healthier by taking a vaccine? Is it possible? That's, in a sense, how it's presented to us in the commercials. Look at this timeline. Now there's a timeline of genetic vaccines. These are vaccines that depend on genetic material, RNA or DNA. And then they produce the protein of interest, and that provides the stimulus for immunity. We're in a brand new era, and the investment in genetic technology in the world is extraordinary. In a paper in the British Medical Journal by Lalani and colleagues, tens of billions of dollars were invested from 1985 forward in developing genetic vaccines. In 2012, DARPA, a unit of the military, a research unit of the military, announces a program in 2012. It's called the ADEPT P3 program. And the aspiration of the program is that it's going to end pandemics in 60 days using messenger RNA vaccines. That's 2012 on the website. Somebody should have briefed Trump and said, listen, this isn't new stuff. The military has been wanting to do this since 2012. It's on their website. Somebody will find this, Mr. President. Don't tell America it's brand new technology, and don't tell them it's Operation Warp Speed, because it's not. But yet, nobody tells us. There's the ADEPT P3 project. This is 2012. Look at this. We're going to end a pandemic in 60 days using messenger RNA technology. It's an aspiration, a government aspiration. Well, the history of vaccines, and this is in my book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, we go back to the very beginning. John Leake is a principal author. He's considered the world's most prominent historian at this time. It's a New York Times bestseller. We go back to the great prelude, smallpox vaccination. The country, North America, United States, Canada, and the UK, became so enthralled with smallpox vaccination towards the end of the 19th century that parents were put in jail if they didn't have their child undergo smallpox vaccination. When it first started out, it was called variolation, and Cotton Mather was the first to try it with Dr. Boylston in Boston, 1721. Cotton Mather declared this was a gift from God. That was his declaration. Cotton Mather is also famous for another professional activity. He was the lead counselor to the judges in the Salem witchcraft trial. Cotton Mather believed in witches. But as Cotton Mather got going with Dr. Boylston, Ben Franklin was following, and little Frankie dies of smallpox. Boy, Ben Franklin does a 180 and says, I'm behind variolation. People didn't even know what caused smallpox at the time. Smallpox was largely eradicated in the world with less than 10% of people ever getting the smallpox vaccine. What essentially made it go away? Well, it's the same thing that made other infectious diseases go away for which there's no vaccines. Like scarlet fever has essentially gone away. Tuberculosis has come under control. There's no vaccines for these. It's modern sanitation, nutrition, and hygiene that brought infectious diseases under control, not vaccines. With the polio outbreak, the worst it was in the 1950s. Probably all of you remember seeing these images of kids on iron lungs. At the worst it was, the Salk field trials were undertaken. And some of this was randomized and placebo-controlled trials. It clearly was case comparative. But 1.8 million children were enrolled in the Salk field trials in the 1950s. Do you know how many cases of polio were in those trials? Under 200. And the polio vaccine was about 60 to 70% effective, not 100% effective. So no, the polio vaccine did not make polio go away. We developed modern sanitation, we had clean drinking water, better management of sewer water. We have been told a story, if you go on the CDC website or the WHO, that vaccination is the greatest accomplishment of public health. That's a myth. The greatest accomplishment is what you're enjoying today. Modern sanitation, good nutrition, and better hygiene. They're the heroes. The engineers are the heroes, not the vaccinologists. Experimentation and development, there's a reality here that vaccines have done good in society. The case count of measles is down. The case count of chickenpox is way down. There's a reality there. But for every one of these realities, there is another perspective to consider. How many of you had chickenpox as a child? Okay. How many of you took the vaccine, chickenpox vaccine? Anybody? A few of you, younger people. Well, if you had natural chickenpox, as opposed to taking the vaccine, you have a lower rate of shingles. The people who took the vaccine, 5 studies show this, they have a higher rate of shingles later on. There's never any perfect vaccine. There's always a trade-off. Parents aren't told that today, that we can do this or not do this. You know, Denmark, we've been adjusted now to Denmark and their schedule. We're pretty close to it. They don't even vaccinate for chickenpox. Many of you know Dr. Drew Pinsky. He's with our group, Chief Medical Board at the Wellness Company. I was on TV with him, and you know, he said, listen, I didn't get my kids vaccinated for chickenpox. I said, I did. He goes, no. He says, you're better off letting them get natural immunity. So it's interesting that even today, there's a series of trade-offs in the modern vaccination era. But what we entered in with COVID is what's called the bioweapons era. It's clear what was going on in Wuhan, China, and what's going on in the over the dozen biolabs in the United States, including University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston near me. And it's memorialized in the Biden legislation published in the summer of 2024, that we are in the business of creating biological threats that can get an entire population sick, like the COVID-19 pandemic. Could be a virus, could be a bacteria, could be a fungus. We're in the business of creating biological weapons, for sure. And the labs that are busily working at this through government funding and agency funding and surreptitious lines of funding and foundations, They're also in the business of making countermeasures. Countermeasures is a military term, but now it's used in this field for vaccines and therapeutics and masks and testing. Those are all countermeasures. In fact, the U.S. was ramping up for this, and in 2005, the PrEP Act was passed. It says, listen, we're in the bioweapons business. There's going to be a pandemic, and when there is one, all of the countermeasures are free of liability. Go for it. Vaccines, testing, gowns, masks, therapeutics. So you can see what's going on now. It's not a nuclear arms race, it's a bioweapons arms race. Create a biological threat and then create an answer, like a vaccine. And if you hold those in your hands, you hold power. Peter Daszak, who was part of this collaboration that created the SARS-CoV-2 virus, when he testified in Congress, he goes, listen, I got a couple more dozen samples left in the Wuhan lab. What does he have locked and loaded? COVID-20, COVID-21? This is what's going on. Now, Trump and the new administration has cut off federal funding for this. Is that enough? No. No. This all needs to be shut down. The Chinese were funding a lab in California making bioweapons. That was up in the news about a year ago. You don't need the U.S. government to create bioweapons. It needs to be shut down. It's frankly dangerous. It's like trying to create a nuclear bomb in your local university, and there's no control over this. There are hundreds of leaks from these laboratories. We've published this on Focal Points, our Substack, papers published. These biolabs are not safe for the population, and our governments are playing games. Probably are a lot of these in Ukraine. They're across Africa. China is clearly in the game. Groups are trying to get leverage. Anthony Fauci was clearly involved with Ralph Baric at the UNC Chapel Hill, Peter Daszak, Dr. Xingling Li in Wuhan. The lab in Wuhan played a role, the lab at UNC Chapel Hill played a role, and the Hamilton Research Laboratory in Hamilton, Montana, the USAID Research Lab, all played a role. They have peer-reviewed published papers saying we're creating a virus, a bat coronavirus that can infect humans. Fauci knows he's deep into this because he approached Biden for 10 years of clemency for crimes he knew he committed. What's inexplicable is how Trump and Biden are aligned with Fauci, and they're aligned with the COVID vaccines. That's a stupendous observation. In fact, Trump is still taking them. I just did a Twitter poll getting ready to come out here, and I asked across a bunch of platforms, how many of you are taking COVID boosters? How many of you? The CDC says 15%, but that's a survey. The survey says, are you likely to take one? Well, listen, people who fill out a survey, they want to kind of be a good citizen. They kind of say, well, yeah, I'm likely to take one. But how many actually took one? Answer, less than 1%. Yeah. No one's taking these. Effectively, the COVID vaccine program was shut down by public figures like myself and Dr. Gold and Lance Wallnau and all of you in the room. We shut this down. And we shut it down because it's not safe for human use. There are thousands of peer-reviewed papers that demonstrate the COVID vaccines are not safe for human use. We've gone through Alex Azar, Xavier Becerra, and Robert F. Kennedy, and none of them in office express a single concern regarding these vaccines, let alone pull them off the market. We've been through Stephen Hahn, Robert Califf, and now Marty Makary. Once in office, they're looking everywhere except for the vaccines. They're focused on, fat in steaks or food dyes or fluoride, but yet under the watch of the current Trump administration, hundreds of people have died taken the boosters, even though very few people are taking boosters. There's something about government. This is a very important observation. When governments make a giant mistake that costs the lives of their citizens in large numbers, war is an example. A pandemic is an example. People really did die of COVID-19 in large numbers. People really have died of the COVID vaccine in large numbers. Neither Trump or Biden has commissioned even a single review on what's happened. Neither has Robert F. Kennedy. As if nothing has happened. Do you know there's no grand rounds on this at any medical school? You know, there's a large continuing medical education series in medicine called Pri-Med. You know, Pri-Med has nothing on the pandemic. As if it never happened. Just erase it out of the minds. Just like cocaine and smoking, just erase it out of the minds. Probably the pandemic, historically, will not be reviewed for about 50 years. And then people will start to look into this and say, oh my Lord, they didn't treat COVID effectively at home on day one, and people were allowed to get sicker and sicker. Then they went in the hospital. They had their rights taken away from them, and they died under the watch of Trump and under the watch of Biden. Really? And genetic vaccines were advanced. Genetic vaccines, which to our knowledge are long-acting, they may never leave the human body. There's no known enzymes that gets rid of them from the body. They're coded to produce the lethal part of the virus, the spike protein, which was engineered in a Chinese biosecurity lab. It can't get any worse than that. It's the worst idea ever in medicine to create a genetic vaccine that produces an uncontrolled quantity and an uncontrolled duration of a lethal protein. You can't come up with a worse science fiction movie than that. 81% of Americans took one or more shots. Current estimates are about 10% of Americans are sick in some way from taking the shots. Now, fortunately, 19% didn't take the shots. No recognition of those 10% who are sick. They are furious. They're furious at Biden. They're furious at Trump. They're furious at Becerra and Azar and Kennedy and the FDA commissioners. They're furious at their doctors. They've lost trust. You can understand why. Look at the doses of vaccines that have built up over time. People have wondered, was this COVID vaccine debacle, was it an indicator of some type of delusional madness over vaccines in general? I think the answer is yes. Here's the vaccine schedule just before it was trimmed. But look at this. This is around age 15 months. A baby gets 16 different shots. If I prescribed you 16 medicines, for sure you're going to have a side effect. Can you imagine giving baby 16 things at once? What happens? Some of them get a high fever. They really start crying. Some of them don't get a fever. Some of them just get sick and they don't do much. They don't suckle. They don't interact with their parents much. Parents put them in a crib. The next morning they can find them dead. That's called sudden infant death syndrome. 78% of sudden infant death syndrome occurs right after this, a big battery of vaccines. 78% of the SIDS cases. This is astonishing. In the state of Louisiana, Burl Hamadeh, who's one of the representatives, has reviewed the data, and she put forward legislation saying a SIDS case, a healthy baby who dies, should have their vaccine record examined at the time of the medical examiner examination. The medical examiners uniformly rejected this. No, we don't want to look at the vaccine record. It's willful blindness. It's willful blindness. Do you know there's been a prospective randomized trial in premature babies in the hospital? And the trial basically pitted giving the routine vaccinations of the little baby in the hospital, because they're in the hospital so long, versus holding off. And the babies who got the vaccines in the hospital, they had a higher rate of apnea, and they stopped breathing, and the nurses had to shake them and revive them. Well, what happens if the baby's at home and they have apnea and the parents aren't right there? That's sudden infant death syndrome. We've got a 5-alarm fire going off right now in modern pediatrics, and the average pediatrician refuses to face reality, as well as the medical examiners. Here are the data on sudden infant death syndrome. You can see the vast majority of SIDS cases occur within a week of the baby getting the big battery of vaccines. Here's a CDC paper showing for sure the vaccines cause febrile seizures. Some of the babies that get the temperature so hot, greater than 104 degrees Fahrenheit, they have a seizure. And for some children, the seizure is not benign. The seizure is reflective of inflammation in the brain. It's called encephalitis. In fact, there are 20 vaccines that list as a side effect encephalitis in the package insert. It's not a surprise. Listen, my kids took the MMR vaccine. As a parent, I never read the package insert. But if I would have, it says it can cause encephalitis, brain inflammation. And as a result of brain inflammation, we have big trouble. Look at this. This is GSK versus Merck in their MMR. For sure, they're tracking febrile seizures. It's happening in their clinical trials. This is a very important paper by Nielsen and colleagues demonstrating of children who develop a febrile seizure, 40% of them convert. They are left with ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, tics, involuntary facial movements, or epilepsy. 40%. A febrile seizure after vaccination is a harbinger of potentially a lifelong disaster for parents. No wonder parents are up in arms. This recent analysis is one of now a dozen papers or so showing children who take no vaccines whatsoever are healthier than children who take vaccines. Healthier in today's modern age. A healthy child born today is going to be much less likely to have autism or epilepsy or allergic disorders if they go natural. This is Florida, right here in Florida, 10% of Medicaid recipients, the children have no record of taking any vaccines. So McCullough Foundation on October 27th published the most comprehensive, scientifically supported, evidence-based report on the determinants of autism spectrum disorder. We reviewed every paper going back from the beginning, right back to Leo Kanner's original observation of autism in the 1940s, all the way forward. We sent this to Robert F. Kennedy, everybody in the White House, everybody in HHS, everybody in the CDC, and everybody in the FDA. We made it clear, and it should be clear to everyone, there is an autism epidemic, an absolute epidemic. It is going to consume us. 1 in 31 children, 3.2% of all children, over 5% in California, 27% of them have profound autism. Can't communicate, never will communicate, can't use the toilet independently. It's a disaster. How many of you are touched by autism in your family with some disaster? I am. Yeah, it's about a quarter of us now. It's in lockstep with this vaccine madness. If this was a curve of smoking and lung cancer, it would look the same. If it was a curve of cocaine and addiction, it would look the same. We have entered a period now of clear, unbridled vaccine madness. And the COVID vaccine era has ushered this in. What did we find? We found that, sure, there are some common genetic variants. There are risk factors like older parents, older parents, men over 40, women over 35, delivering a baby before 37 weeks, some in utero exposures that are heavy-duty drugs over 9 months, like antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-epileptics, not a dose of Tylenol. That was a gross attempt at deception by the current administration. No, it's not Tylenol. I have medical authority to tell you it's not Tylenol. If I was part of that team in Washington, I'd say, no, sorry. Sorry, Mr. President, that's not happening. It's not Tylenol. Let's go through this. Okay, we have to call it. The big risk factor is giving vaccines in combination. In susceptible children who may have other risks, giving a big battery of vaccines converts the child to autism. The case series are clear now. It happens within a few days or a few weeks or a few months of taking the battery of vaccines. Does it happen in every child? No. Clearly, there must be predisposing factors. My kids took all the vaccines. They're perfectly fine. I took them all. But that's just because my kids are okay doesn't mean the next kid's going to be okay. Well, we sent this to Washington. What happened? Within 3 weeks, the CDC changes their language on the vaccine and autism on their website, saying, you know, this hasn't been ruled out. Within 90 days, Trump just bypasses RFK. He goes to Jim O'Neill, who's the acting CDC director, who's not a medical person, and he just says, trim the schedule. And O'Neill trims off probably politically the less contentious vaccines, but the big combinations, DPT and MMR, are still on the program, and I anticipate that's not going to solve this autism problem. But it doesn't stop here. Some of you probably saw me on TV this week about an autistic Barbie doll. So instead of recognizing that autism is a neuropsychiatric condition that needs intensive cognitive behavioral therapy, intensive training, and parental effort from the beginning, Leo Kanner, who first described autism, in his report, interestingly said the parents of autistic children, in his view, are exceptional, and I agree. The parents of autistic children, you will find, are some of the most exceptional parents ever because they've had to do this out of necessity. But this is now one of a dozen dolls, and this one in particular is trying to normalize this, that it's normal. This little Barbie can't look you in the eye. The Barbie's wearing headphones because of hyperacusis. Barbie can't handle normal volumes like we're listening to right now. Well, there's a clear linkage between autism and transgenderism. This giant study from Warrior in the UK demonstrates this. Transgender came out of nowhere. None of us even heard about it 10 years ago. Well, where did it come from? It's coming from autism. The young people who are wanting to change their gender have autism. They're suggestible. They feel ostracized. They're having trouble with dating and the opposite sex. And the counselors and others pounce on this. They bombard them with pornography. They confuse them. Then ultimately they're convinced to change their genders. And then they start this journey, this heinous journey. The puberty blockers, the most common one given is Lupron. That permanently impairs cognitive function. That child will never think as well as they could have without getting a dose of Lupron. Elon Musk's son got a dose of Lupron. I messaged him on that. The androgens and estrogens make the kids sick. They cause acne, they can't sleep, they're nausea, vomiting. Screws them up. Taking the breasts off a normal girl permanently screws up the lymphatic drainage in the chest, causes contractures. Then it gets worse. Surgery that begins to change the clitoris, metoidioplasty or phalloplasty, permanently disfigures that girl. The urine doesn't drain well. There's infection, revisions. For the boy, physically removing the penis or taking the penis, opening it long ways, cutting it out and stuffing it in internally, what's called penile inversion vaginoplasty, is heinous. Removing the testicles. That's going on. Now, fortunately, Ken Paxton in Texas and other places in Florida, it was banned. It still hasn't stopped. In Texas, at my medical school, UT Southwestern, dozen or more doctors are still doing it. Now Paxton has to try to take them to court. There's a madness that's set in among doctors. This direction of taking autistic children and trying to change their gender it's like a science fiction medical horror story. It increases the burden of psychiatric care. It's sterilizing, disfiguring, and increases mortality. And when Ken Paxton's office reached out to me, he said, Dr. McCullough, we're trying to fight off the ACLU and the Texas Supreme Court. We can't find a qualified doctor to go against transgender. I told him, you found one now. Your doctors, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Your doctors should clearly know the difference between a male and a female. And if your doctors are not disturbed and moved by this, you better tell them about it. You better tell them about it. We can't all change doctors, but you can make your opinions known in the office visit. It's your right to do so. The Association of American Physicians and Surgeons is one of the doctors' organizations to support. It passed a resolution in 2020 saying there should be no requirements for vaccines at all. None. None for school, none for employment, none for the military. And finally, 25 years later, here in Florida, Joe Ladapo, Surgeon General, my colleague, and Ron DeSantis have finally gotten rid of these. We should get rid of them all over. Vaccines should only be personal choice. If there's a linkage to vaccines and autism to transgenderism, you can see how insidious this is in society. We have about 60% of parents now who are not going to have their kids go through the full vaccine schedule. So you're going to see many, many papers. People say, well, there's measles cases. Well, listen, we can treat measles. We can treat all these different illnesses. Probably polio, believe it or not, is treatable with modern methods. We have to ask ourselves, what are we doing with taking a perfectly healthy person and giving them medical problems that they wouldn't have had? Joe Ladapo is probably the highest physician public figure with medical authority. Now, Joe has treated COVID patients as I have, and neither Joe or I are in power positions in Washington. That should tell you something. Every doctor we have in Washington has never seen or examined a COVID patient, has never shown one courageous action to save their patient from the pandemic illness or warn somebody about the vaccines. Every doctor we have in Washington took the shots themselves. That should tell you something. And none of them now have taken any steps to remove the dangers of certainly the COVID vaccines in the population. So during great controversies, the medical establishment loses insight and does not self-correct because of ideology and physician participation. Cocaine, smoking, and now excessive vaccination. The current situation is excessive childhood vaccines are driving this epidemic of neuropsychiatric illness. Neuropsychiatric illness is driving the transgender crisis. And instead of correction, we see normalization. We see making this normal. And parents will decline full vaccine schedules in greater numbers to protect their children. It's not anti-vaccine. I tell people I'm not against vaccine. I've taken 69 shots myself. I'm not against vaccines, but I'm aware of the risks. We cannot fall prey to propaganda. Propaganda, there are 6 propaganda terms. I refuse to use them or get into mudslinging fights over this. Misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, anti-vaxxer, anti-science, conspiracy theorist. Anytime somebody throws around those terms, they are trying to gain leverage over you. Richard Blumenthal, senator from Connecticut, was the ranking member when last time I testified in the Senate. Some of you probably saw this. And he led, before a word came out of my mouth, with one of these propaganda leverage terms. And I called him on it. I said, you're trying to gain leverage over me before I even speak. And I told him, don't do that again. I don't want to ever see that from a public servant at the podium ever again. Remember, everybody in government works for you, including Trump. Everyone works for you. Treat them like your employee. Don't treat them like kings. Don't treat them like, the next dictator who's going to dictate on you. They are public servants. I'm greatly disturbed in Washington. I see it in the conservative media, and I'm a frequent contributor on Fox and other stations, that there now is nearly complete alignment. There's no disagreement on anything going on with the current administration. None. There's no daylight between the 15 cabinet members and the president on any issue. That's alarming. There's no disagreement, by the way, between Vladimir Putin and anybody around him. None. I've been to Moscow. I've been to the Politburo. I can tell you, none. Be careful when you see uniform agreement. Be careful when you see a major arm in the media completely agree with every move of the administration. Something is wrong. There should always be dissent. There should always be different points of view. Always. Lincoln, who was a real leader, he brought a team of rivals around him. He got tons of different opinions. That's how we progress as a nation, not by a strong man giving a dictate and then everybody getting in line. That's not how it works. You're bigger and stronger than that. I am, for sure. And we have to have people like that who are willing to give their opinion. The vast majority of doctors during the pandemic evaporated. And a few were willing to go on national TV and say, you know what, I disagree. There's a different approach. I was one of them. I didn't sign up for this. But boy, we better see that in geopolitics. We better see that in the economy. We better see that in other areas. I'm greatly concerned now about this uniform agreement on things. It seems like every week there's something crazier. So to finish and conclude, we've entered a time of great controversy. Our great controversy appears to be no recognition of what's happened during the pandemic and very little recognition about this craziness that's occurred with excessive vaccination. Vaccine ideology, you should be aware of it. Vaccine ideology goes like this. It's a form of a false religion. We put this out in our book. It presents a thesis that man is susceptible to infectious diseases. But through the brilliance of mankind, man can improve God's creation. Man outdoes God through vaccines. But the vaccines aren't perfect. So for this to work, everyone must take them, without exception. And if somebody is harmed or disabled or even dies due to a vaccine, they should take it for the betterment of humanity. That's vaccine ideology. Most doctors will tell you that. I'll say, do you know the CDC has on record 19,500 dead Americans after the vaccine? Like some of them immediately die in the vaccine center. And the response is, well, I think it was worth it. I think it was worth it. They think it's a fair trade-off. That number, by the way, is probably underreported 30-fold. The real number is probably 550,000 Americans. That's worse than a war, a big war. No recognition by Trump, no recognition by Biden. Think about this time we're living in. There's never any recognition of the harms of war. No country says, well, listen, let's have a review of this. What mistake did we make in this war? When large numbers of civilians are harmed, governments turn a blind eye throughout history. Don't expect your government here to express any apologies over this. This is about you seeking the truth. This is about you standing strong. This is about you saving yourself. If we have another pandemic, the government is not going to save you. So check out the Wellness Company as I think an organization that will save you, twc.health/Lance. That's Lance promo code. We've got emergency medical kits. We have detoxification protocols, all evidence-based, published. And we've met with Robert F. Kennedy and the CDC. I said, what are you guys doing for the next pandemic? They had 0 answers. I told Kennedy, I said, I've got an answer. We'll take care of the country. You guys just get out of the way. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. Thank you. Thank you. So I would love to take some questions. I want to make sure if I have enough time. Do I have time? Okay. So questions. We'll run out some mics if people have questions. Yes, you're the first one up.
Can you talk about mRNA in our food supply?
Right now, messenger RNA is in pork. It's not yet in other food supplies, and there's self-replicating genetic vaccines that are being used in your pets right now. So that's where we are right now. We don't know if the messenger RNA, by the way, is denatured or kind of heated away through heating, but I imagine it is. It's still disconcerting. I personally don't want to eat pork because of that and other reasons. Yes? We'll wait for the mic. So she'll run. Okay, go ahead.
So, I'm a registered nurse that became awake during the whole COVID thing, but, you know, obviously this is very discouraging. I have a nephew that died from crib death. I have a nephew that has autism. But my question is, what can we do after hearing all this doom and gloom? What do we do with that information?
Well, you know, I think one of the things that certainly I've done is I think all of us are taking better care of our health, right? So I think one of the best strategies are nasal sprays and gargles, which every study shows works. They work far better than masks or hand sanitizers. Many are taking more nutraceuticals and supplements, a multivitamin, immune boosters, vitamin C, etc. And many are getting emergency medical kits. It's fair. Listen, it's a pretty low cost to have some drugs pre-prescribed. Every single medical illness responds quickly if you treat it on day 1. Many times is untreatable at 5 days. But most of this has to do with, in a reasonable way, taking matters into your own hands. There was another, yeah, here it is.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. We just appreciate you so much. But my question is, what about the monoclonal antibodies? Could you explain that?
Yeah, monoclonal antibodies, there were 6 of them used during the pandemic. They were safe and effective. I used them extensively. They were, you know, the real jewels of Operation Warp Speed. And it's sad that neither Trump or Biden ever actually realized that's actually, if they want to brag about Operation Warp Speed, yet inexplicably they were taken off the market about 6 weeks after each one was entered on. And Ron DeSantis down here and Joe LaDapple were pulling their hair out. Joe and I were communicating. I said, I'm using them in Dallas. They're working great. Trump actually got monoclonal antibodies. I can tell you, all I can tell you is this. I'm critical of Trump. I'm critical of Biden. All I can tell you is if I was Trump, remember Trump got COVID in April of 2020. He's overweight and he's older. He's pretty strong, but he's overweight and he's older. If I was Trump, what I would do is I'd say, listen, everybody, I'm the president of the United States. I just got COVID. I want every senior citizen in this country to receive the quality of care I got, including monoclonal antibodies and all the drugs. But his failure to do so and his failure to lead by example was part of the story why we did have our seniors die. That's kind of on him. I would have done different. Yeah.
Practicing pediatrician who's been taking care of kids for over 40 years. I was caught up in this matrix where we were immunizing children, of course. My question to you is, are you and does the government, are they aware that the pediatricians and the authorities that give them their certification, including the American Board of Pediatrics and the AAP, are they aware that those pediatricians are coerced to mandate and exercise vaccines in their populations for fear that if they do not do that, they will actually lose their board certification and their licensure and ability to practice and have be able to take care of other children, because that's exactly what's happening.
Yes.
And those that don't subscribe to that through their board certifications are removed, and therefore all of the children, they're so fearful of losing their practices that they can't take care of children. And so consequently, everyone's on board with giving everyone all these vaccines. And either that or they're extricated from the practice or they homeschool. That's where we're at with that.
Right. So the comment is, it's fear of reprisal, real reprisal, losing a medical license after all that training and practice experience and being decertified and losing one's livelihood if they don't press on with this vaccine agenda. That's an area where we do need federal protections. I faced that myself from the American Board of Internal Medicine. I resigned before they could try to do something to me, but I can tell you, we feel this threat every day. So, Paul Thomas is a pediatrician. He lost his license just because he gave people choice. There's a very prominent pediatric group in Dallas that offers parents choice on vaccines. They're probably under threat. But if you ever have conversations with anybody, that's something where we do need federal protections. We can't have somebody under threat because they're offering patients choice. Yes. And just let me know when I have to completely stop. Yes.
Okay. I am about to be a grandma in May.
Oh, you're too young to be a grandmother.
Thank you. And the mother-to-be is a nurse, and her mother is a nurse. What references can I give them to prevent? My young children are not vaccinated, and they are rarely on antibiotics. They're never sick. I don't worry about any of that. So what references, what can I give the mother-to-be who is educated reference so that they do not vaccinate my grandchild?
I would give them the McCullough Foundation report on the determinants of autism. It's far and away, it's what swayed all the government view on this. There's no doubt about it. It's available on our website, mcculloughfnd.org. It's been widely featured on social media and mainstream media. I would send them that and just read it. You'll see in the press briefing is written by John Leake. He's a best-selling author. It's written in lay person's English. People have to understand this. I'm not yet a grandparent, but I will be hopefully at some point in time. I am scared to death of having a grandchild who is essentially brutally impaired by autism. There are more kids right now who are completely disabled by autism than there ever were children disabled by polio, believe it or not. Autism is a bigger problem than polio. I have polio patients in my practice, and yes, they're affected in a limb, but mentally they're fine. I have autistic patients in my practice, and they cannot function in society.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this awesome presentation. Would you be willing to talk about the spike protein detox? It's a little off subject.
Right, so 97% of us have had COVID, and 81% of us have taken a vaccine. We're super loaded with a little spike on the surface of the virus that the human body can't break down. The spike protein was engineered in this Chinese biosecurity lab. The spike protein causes long COVID. It causes heart inflammation. It causes blood clots. For sure, the spike protein may cause cancer. So all of us have a concern, myself included. And so at the Wellness Company, we've developed a series of products that are evidence-based, scientifically supported, using natural enzymes that do get some penetration in the bloodstream and begin to break down the spike protein so we can clear it. And we see the tests coming down over time. So get the ultimate spike detox from the Wellness Company. That's the strongest product, twc.health/Lance. And you'll see in the Wellness Company website, you'll see kind of all the scientific development behind it. There's no other product out there that helps you get rid of the spike protein. People have said, well, take nicotine or other things, but it doesn't actually get rid of it. You want to get rid of it. The other things we do are assistive. Yes?
What is being done to investigate the deaths of those who have given their lives because they chose to fight back and not do what they were asked to do, and that is not treat, or to treat in ways that they knew did not work? What is being done? I know one physician who was murdered.
Virtually nothing is being done to seek justice. This has gone up to high courts, Supreme Court in different areas. Virtually nothing's done. I've met with Rand Paul in his office. Rand just went on Joe Rogan. Rand Paul and I, by the way, went to Baylor at the same time. And he's made multiple criminal referrals for Fauci. There seems to be no interest in justice. And there's something about this. This pandemic was essentially considered like a war. Most of the time in a war, there's very little interest in justice afterwards. I think we just have to stay assertive, bring it up in conversations. I'll tell you somebody in Washington who does want justice besides Rand Paul, and that's Senator Ron Johnson. I think Ron Johnson's a national hero. I've testified for him multiple times in the U.S. Senate. I'll do it again. And every time I go to Washington, I have to be more and more assertive. But until this gets to the office of the president or at a cabinet level and somebody actually takes this on, I don't see any justice coming. It's too big. There were too many people affected. The entire medical community is digging in and saying they were right on things. But they were wrong on COVID, just like they're wrong on cocaine and smoking. Yes?
I love this. Well, wait a second. Hold on one second. I just want to make sure we get something out on this medical emergency kit. I told them about it, and it would be terrible if we didn't mention it. Describe to them what that is.
Right. There is an array of, if you go on the website, go to twc.health if you can, if you're on the web. There's an array of emergency medical kits. I know I gave a historical perspective today, but Lance wants the practical, and it's true. The emergency medical kits come in an array of colors, but they give you pre-prescribed medications with a guidebook and access to telemedicine so you can treat problems at home, from a bronchitis to influenza to COVID to a urinary tract infection, a fungal infection. And for a few $100s, you can be prepared ahead of time, and you can do this. Remember, an urgent care visit's $1,000 or more. Emergency room is absolutely a misery. So go to twc.health/Lance.
I mean, even a doctor needs it. What happened with your wife?
Yeah, my wife was recently helping my daughter move, and she got impaled with a cactus thorn and got a pretty wicked infection. And if we didn't have the emergency medical kit, she would have been in the ER handling this. We were able to handle it at home.
So you all get that? The little booklet is priceless because it's like your little cheat codes to everything. Did you mention the detox for spike protein?
Yeah,
you mentioned that.
Ultimate Spike Detox comes in a gold
Write it down.
label. Virtually everybody should be on it. I personally am on it right now. The advantages are with nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin is they are healthy from a cardiovascular perspective, and they're the only thing. I have thousands of patients under direct observation. For sure, the reflections of spike concentration in the body come down, and we want to see this stuff out of our bodies.
Now, I noticed that my staff put together a panel later on today, which would be with our doctors to have Q&A with all of them. So you haven't had a chance to think about it, but now that you've been listening to them, write down the question you wish you could ask them if you're bumped into them in the buffet line, because you're all going to do it to them anyway. But we're going to have a session where you get to ask the question, okay? So you might, as you're contemplating what you heard today, like for instance, to me, the groundbreaking correlation between the transgender and autism, the fact that there's data on that.
That's it.
See, to me,
mind-blowing.
isn't it amazing the degree to which we're battling that whole transgender ideology, and nobody's had the courage to bring up that obvious little piece. And that's a Joe Rogan segment and an Elon Musk repeat on X that would shift the dialogue immediately.
For sure.
So when you get that kind of information, my ears perk up and I go, wow, nobody's talking about that. Why? It's like the devil's making it radioactive. Don't go near that. It's like, oh, well, we're going to go near that.
That's it.
Does that make sense? Doctor, you've been so gracious.
You're
Thank
the
you
best.
very much.
Thank you.
We'll have you back.
Thank you, everybody.